Welcome, everyone. My name is James Williamson. I'm the chair of the uh, Education Committee for TARO. I'm joined today with Robert Weaver, who's heading up the ad hoc committee for remediation for finding aids, and the Foki and Amy Bowman, who are our tarot training experts. So today's our tarot 2.0 training kickoff. There's going to be a lot of information um, kind of given to you. And we're going to share the slides, obviously, and there'll be more kind of, information to come. This is just kind of, kind of starting the rollout for training for both the remediation of legacy finding aids and legacy tarot, and then training for how to use Tarot 2.0, as we're calling it. So let's go ahead and just kind of to give you an overview of the schedule for rollout for Tarot 2.0. On 18th, Tarot 2.0 will have its soft launch, followed by usability testing. So there'll be a usability ad hoc group who will have about 2.5 months, basically till the beginning of August, to kind of do testing on the soft launch. Then in September, the developers will begin their deployment checklist. Obviously, I think the most important date for everyone will be the freezing of the legacy site on September 1st, which will allow library IT to do the final migration of legacy finding aids. And then we'll have the hard launch in September 28th. And then full development will end in December 31st. And then the 5% developer time will begin January 1st. So those are kind of the important dates that you'll need to know. We'll share this not just in this presentation, but it'll be available elsewhere and in other documentation. So it's not the last time that you'll see it. So I guess the biggest thing is, what resources are we going to be providing to Tarot members to help with the migration of the finding aids and the kind of the learning curve for using the new Tarot system? With, it's going to have some different processes. Some of the things that we've used in the past will specifically kind of how we upload finding aids will be going away, and we'll need to provide information to you to help you use the new Tarot system. We've got a Tarot resources library going on the Tarot Today site, where we're putting the documentation that's being created for Tarot 2.0, and all the documentation that has existing Tarot documentation that has been updated for Tarot 2.0. So I wanted to point out that the best practice guidelines has been updated to 4.0 beta, which you can find in the resources library. It's also available on the wiki if you have access to the wiki. Basically, they've updated examples, the template, made sure that the elements that we have made required in Tarot 2.0 are reflected in that documentation, and which elements are preferred. Making sure, obviously, any attributes that are required for Tarot compliance is in the best practices guidelines. There's still existing information that will become obsolete once the new Tarot system is is rolled out. So the section about uploading finding aids using SS Secure Shell, that's will be obsolete shortly. So really kind of the focus is on the template and then the chart that is at the back end of the best practices guidelines. And if you go to the resources library, we have the best practices guidelines, and then I've taken the chart and exported it out. So you can it's in two separate places. So if you just need access to the chart itself, you can go to the resources library. Um, there are new examples and a new template that has been updated to fit the requirements for TARO 2.0. So if you have an existing template that you use for your creation of finding aids, um, please download the new template, kind of double check things to make sure that the new finding aids that you are creating will meet compliance and not require um, remediation. The biggest kind of resource that we've created so far is the Tarot Guide to Remediation. Basically, in conjunction with the ad hoc group, we've been going through select finding aids to kind of pull out common errors that we've seen, and how you might be able to address them. It'll also explain errors that you'll see on the testing server, which I'll get to in a bit. So there's examples of all different kinds of errors that you might come across when you're working on remediating your finding aids. So if you should have a question or you come across something you're not really sure, um, go to the guide to remediation. We've got all the elements that are listed as required, and then all the elements that are listed preferred, and then common issues that we have noticed kind of in the remediation of this selecting finding aids. So at least you'll be able to address those situations a little bit easier. Obviously, if you find you have an example that isn't in the guide um, and requires greater attention, you'll work with the ad hoc group um, through the buddy system that Robert will talk about in a little bit. So, but we've tried to um, put as much as as we could find in that document, and we'll probably update that document as we go. There in the email that Robert's sent out to all primary contacts for Terra repositories. There's a link to the Google Doc itself, and we'll probably plan to update that with more issues that that we find, because now we're obviously working with all finding aids rather than just select finding aids from a couple of repositories. So make sure you have a copy of that. And if you don't, you can certainly contact me or Robert Weaver and we can get you a copy. So as far as kind of that, that's the material for Tarot remediation. What's going to be available for Tarot 2.0? Obviously, we're going to do some new video guides and documentation for Tarot 2.0. A couple of months back, we sent out a survey to all the primary contacts for Tarot, asking, what are some of the topics that you want covered in Tarot 2.0, and kind of just in the creation of finding aids in general. And we've taken that survey and kind of created a kind of um, a library of things that we're going to document and create tutorials for, and then we'll provide that through the resources library on day. So that'll be all available for Tarot today. Obviously, some of the things we can't address now because we haven't even had the soft launch. So the kind of rollout of this material will kind of follow along the same trajectory as the rollout for Tarot 2.0. And then we're going to try to expand, as I mentioned earlier, expand on compliance errors that we've noticed in the remediation of finding aids, and trying to help, you know, educate the tarot community on those things before it gets to the process of having to try to figure out what exactly the problem is. So we'll take a lot of, we'll take a lot of the feedback that you provide, and kind of reincorporate it and try to help other members. So one of the biggest kind of sources that tarot members will be able to use is a testing server for the testing of finding aids to see if they meet compliance to TARO 2.0. And they call this the qual server, but we'll just call it the testing server, where you'll be able to upload a finding aid, and it will provide you information as possible of issues within the finding aid, and what elements need to be corrected so that your finding aid is compliant with TARO 2.0. So there are instructions for how to use this server on Tarot Today, and there's also the same instructions in the Tarot Guide to Migration and Remediation. Then they're the exact, you'll be able to, multiple places you'll be able to find this. I think the things to kind of look out for using this qual server is to realize that um, that you'll that obviously hitting those required elements and making sure they they are compliant will be the first major thing you will encounter, and then you'll receive warnings for preferred elements. Um, some other issues to kind of look at, it's not going to pinpoint exactly where your problem is. So should you have, tags with similar child elements? So, and I'll go over some examples in just a minute. But tags with similar child elements will produce the same error. So it's not going to pinpoint exactly which element your error is in. So it's still going to require some kind of detective work in your finding aid. And then um, you would receive similar error matching errors for things that if you didn't have the element and it was required, um, you get one error. If you did have the element, but it was a certain element and it didn't have text within it, like if the checker is looking for free text, it would produce the same element. And a lot of these errors and error messages are in the guide to remediation and migration. So be sure to check that as well, and that will explain sort of the issues with the messages that you'll receive through this testing server. And then you have to remember it's a work in progress. So if you receive a warning and you go to your finding aid and you check it and you say, no, it should meet compliance. I do not know why I'm receiving this. Document your issues, and then you'll notify Carla Alvarez, um, provide the information to her, and then we'll kind of continue to kind of work on this testing server and refine it as much as it can be refined, because the thing to consider is that the developers who are working on this testing server are obviously working on the new Tarot system, so we have to be conscious of how we use their time and what things we can address. So but it's good to have those issues documented, and we'd be able to share that with the wider tarot community. So at least there's an understanding of why you're receiving certain error messages, even though your finding aids do fall within compliance. Okay. Oh, so let's go ahead and nope, kind of talk about the uh, the testing server. So you will in the instructions to how to use this testing server, you'll request password, username, and password. Um, Once you receive that information, please document it somewhere so you have the ability to access it, because the link itself will have to be refreshed every once in a while to provide that information. So it's not a link that continues in perpetuity. So we'll try to update it as much as possible. But so once you get the Tarot, once you get your username and password, please document it. But once you log into the qual server, you'll see something like this. And here is where you'll add your finding aids. So pretty simple, just select your XML file and then select the repository um, that you are associated with. Um, and then you'll click save, and then the error messages will be produced. So let's take a look at kind of the first issue. So when you upload um, your your file to this testing server, it's going to give you error messages that focus on required fields before it gives you any warnings. It's not going to group it all together. It's just going to give you the required error message first. So in uploading your files to this testing server, don't assume because you don't see a warning about something that you don't have warnings. It's always going to give you the messages for the required fields first. You'll have to resolve those, upload the file again, and see if you can get any warnings. So let's take a look at an example. So we've got our file. Obviously, you can see it's got no abstract, so we know what the error is going to be. This was provided to us by Rice, so thanks, Amanda. So we'll select Rice University, and then we'll click Save. And so here you'll receive your error message, missing abstract when trying to find the abstract. Obviously, because we've altered the file name, it's not going to be correctly formatted for the Tarot identifier field. Um, so you know that you're missing your abstract file. You go into whatever XML editor that you're using, and you'll add your abstract. You'll upload your new file, and you'll click Save. Now we're receiving our warnings. We've corrected the required field, and we can see these are the warnings. So obviously, you're not. Uh, we would want you to address as many of the warnings as possible, but in some cases, you wouldn't have a certain field, even though it's listed as preferred. That's not going to prevent your files from being moved to the new Tarot site. Obviously, the first priority is compliance with required fields. But this is just a good opportunity to go back and check your files. There was the script that ran the that did the analog encoding, but that's if you would have had it blank. So it's not going to necessarily correct a mistake if you had one in your encoding analog. So you know, take the opportunity to go through your finding aid and use these warnings as a guide to see, okay, I do have the correct analog, or I've got the incorrect. Let me make this change. So that's kind of the first thing to realize with this testing server. And then I think the other big thing is to kind of understand the error messages that you'll receive, and that it's not going to pinpoint exactly where you need to be. So one example would be purse name would appear both as a child element for the origination tag and then for controlled access. If you were to not include your source attribute, whether it was local or Library of Congress, um, it's not going to pinpoint exactly where your error is. So in this example, oop, it worked a moment ago. So in this example, I've removed the attributes for the purse name within the XML file, and you can see, okay, missing attribute on purse name should have encoding analog. You receive the same error, but that doesn't specify which field it is. So you'll need to double check those. You'll need to check both instances of that purse name, whether it's in the origination or it's the controlled access. Another example that I mentioned for things to look out for is the expectation of free text in a field, even though you have the element. If it's expecting free text within the field, it'll still produce the same warning, error warning. So in this case, we've this example, we're missing our head tag for collection summary. You can see it says missing head when trying to find the head. But if I upload a file that does have that head tag for the collection summary, but does not actually have any free text within it, you can see it still produces the exact same error. So just be aware that when you're using the testing server, that you're going to have to, just because you receive the same error twice, receive the exact same error doesn't mean it is the same error. So you'll still have to do a little bit of detective work. But this is just a way to kind of go through your finding aids, and kind of give you at least some information to help with compliance. Uh, so okay. And I'm planning on doing a more robust tutorial on how to use the Tarot server. So this is just kind of or not the Tarot server, sorry, the testing server. Um, so this is just kind of just an introduction for you. Um, Definitely get a chance to, as you're remediating finding aids, playing around and figuring kind of what errors you've got, and then working with the ad hoc remediation group to resolve some of them. But my plan is to do something more robust, so that kind of in the future you'll be able to address things a lot quicker without the need of someone on the other end of an email. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Robert Weaver to talk about the remediation efforts of the ad hoc group and how they will work with you to remediate legacy finding aids before the migration to TARO 2.0. So.
All right. Well, by the way, I saw there's some questions coming up in chat. We're going to try to get those in a Q&A at the end, so keep them coming. First off, thanks to James. I know that was a lot of information for y'all to take in, but he and that outreach subcommittee put a tremendous amount of work into making these resources that I think once you've done it a couple times, you're going to realize those tools are going to make this a snap for you. But okay, as he said, I'm Robert Weaver. I'm the chair of the TARO steering committee, but more germane today, I'm co-chair along with Samantha Dodd from SMU of a group that the steering committee formed whose purpose is to help y'all with preparing finding aids for this migration. So James covered most of the resources that are there. I'm just going to add a few more things that are hopefully there to give you a leg up. The first one, as you can see here, is the buddy system. We've assigned just about every repository buddy to answer questions or otherwise provide guidance through this process. The buddies are listed here, but for those of you who received those emails last week, and it should be most of you, your particular buddy was listed there. If you don't know which one it was, if something happened, email me or Samantha Dodd. Our emails are there at the bottom of this slide. One quick note is that archive space using members have a different setup. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. And those of you who may be supported by the Summerlee grant funded program for new TARO members don't have to worry about this at all. Really, the Summerlee folks are going to be helping you work through this with your own finding aids. So the other thing that we're providing are error reports. They are basically just a Excel spreadsheet that lists each thing that a repository needs to remediate. These are listed finding aid by finding aid, error by error. As James explained, there are required and mandatory errors, and then there are warnings that you receive on that site, or what are called preferred things to change. And those are separated out specifically within this spreadsheet as well. So in other words, this sheet's telling you what you got to do to get your finding aid on the site, and then what's purely designed to make the finding aid work better once the site has it on it. So we link those error reports in the emails that we send out. We attach them to those emails as well, but if you can't find yours, or as these are being updated, usually the first week of every month, if we don't get them to you, get a hold of Samantha or I, and we will make sure you get the newest versions of those. James, can I have the next slide? So the other resources that this group has put together, the first I alluded to a while ago, is a subgroup. Oh, we love subgroups and subcommittees on TARO. This one is dedicated specifically to archive space users. It's led by Rebecca Romanchuk from TSLAC. And this group, of course, it's focusing in the short term on updating existing finding aids to get them ready to appear on TARO 2.0. But one of Becky's goals is to also create tools, techniques, other information that archive space users can use going forward to ensure that future finding aids are error-free right out the gate. So if you are an archive space user, Becky might have already got a hold of you, should have. But if you haven't heard, then go ahead and email her. That email's right there. And then finally, and this is only in its earliest stages, but the Texas Historical Records Advisory Board, THRAB, has looked at repurposing funding that was originally going to be used for TARO trainings over the last year, which of course were canceled, derailed because of COVID. So it's looking at using that funding and shifting it to acquiring someone who can do some hands-on work with finding aids for different repositories. So this is in its earliest stages where we're just planning it out. But if your repository is well and truly in the weeds and needs help between now and mid-June, which is about when this funding will run out, email, you guessed it, me and Samantha, as always. And we'll add your repository to a list that we're keeping of folks who might need help. Then we'll contact you and get that set up. Now, with James's materials and his whole group, that subcommittee put together, as well as the buddies, we're hoping that you can do these things on your own. We've done whatever we can to empower you for that. But this resource is likely going to exist. But if everybody asks for help, and I'm not telling you not to, but if everybody does, then we really have to spread this person thin and give everybody as much help as we can. So take a look at it. If you can't do it yourself, as I said, email me and Samantha, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that helps you out. So again, if you have questions and everything and they haven't been answered yet, I'll try to tackle those in the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amy Bowman and Amanda Foki, who are going to tell you a little bit more about the training opportunities coming up and some other things related to this. Thanks, James.
Hi there. So yeah, there we go. So I know with the move to TARO 2.0, there's understandably a lot of anxiety about how to learn the new procedures and coming up to speed. And so with this in mind, there will definitely be training sessions later on this year to familiarize TARO members with our incoming system. And as Robert mentioned in the initial grant proposal, we had planned for 6 in-person training sessions and 3 webinars. The webinars would cover procedures for submitting new and edited finding aids, editing controlled access terms to comply with a list of approved terms, and also provide a tutorial for TARO public users. And in the grant, we also said that we would do a 1-page manual that would document the new process for submitting finding aids. And as Robert said, we can't do these in-person sessions, and we're still going to do them once the pandemic subsides, and we've already got funding for them in place, so that's good. Next slide. So we've adapted the in-person sessions to do online webinars, and the first of which is the session that we have here today. And this is the training plan for the rest of the grant term. Later on this spring, there'll be a check-in as repositories go through the remediation process. Then this summer, there will be sessions on subject access terms, the finding aid submission process, possibly a session for archive space users, then a status report at the end of the summer. And in the fall, once the public version is released, we'll record a webinar for the general public that has tips on how to use and search on the news site. And we'll announce these webinars on the TARO list in the TARO Today blog. So that's how you get the news to attend. And note that everyone is welcome to attend. It's not just limited to current TARO members, and we'll be recording these so you can watch later if you can't make the session live. And we do hope to pick the in-person session trainings up later on this year. And of course, it's too soon to have any definite details. And with all of this training, note that our planning is really tentative. We're trying to have these to respond to the current needs of TARO members and keep them flexible. For instance, when the grant was written, we didn't even realize the level of remediation that we would have to do to make the finding aids compliant. And so we've adapted our training plans to respond to that and to help members with this. So moving forward with the rest of the project implementation, I think the hope is that we can stay similarly nimble with our training plans and just focus on member needs. So I think that next session is going to be Q&A, time for your questions.
Yeah, so I know there's a couple of questions on the chat. So one of the questions, does the order of the errors mean anything on the testing server? Does that correspond to the order they are in the finding aid? Robert, do you happen to know that?
Generally, in my experience, the order doesn't matter, and it looks like Amanda addressed this as well. So what she said is that it would usually help to search the XML for the tag or the element that it is pointed out. They're not always in order. And one thing that you can expect, James may have mentioned it, but sometimes when you resolve one error, it clears the path when you recheck that finding aid for a couple of new errors that were disguised by that error. It sounds dire, but it's not. So you can complete them in any order. The best practice is to complete all the ones it gives you, check it again, obviously, and then correct any new ones it brings up, and then that'll get you to the warning section, which are optional but recommended to fix. And I think that brings us, Christy had asked a question, Christy Sorensen, if we have to override warnings for files to be uploaded to TARO 2.0, or will they just go to the site as they should, if you ignore for the moment, right, the warnings. And that is true. Anything that, in short, shows up in red text, right, on that qual site, if that's resolved, your finding aid will show up on TARO 2.0. So the main goal is to get everyone past those red text hurdles or required errors. And then Kristen Clark had also asked a question. So if folks hadn't seen it in the chat, she asked, in short, do we still upload files via the FTP, the SSH way that we do right now? And the answer is yes. As you probably saw with what Amy shared, there's going to be a training on the new way to do that, which is going to be done through that site that we just saw, that James showed. Right now, if you were to, when you use that site, you don't actually upload a file anywhere. But once this site is in its final form and you use it, that error checking process that you run on new finding aids will be followed up by the opportunity to upload it, and you can just walk away, which I think that all of us will agree is much preferable to what we do right now. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. This is Amanda. So if we're going along and working on remediation steps for finding aids right now and using the testing site, the qual user site, and it says that our file passed and we use the FTP to upload it to the legacy site like we do normally, then we should stop seeing those finding aids appearing on our error reports, right? But I think that there might be a lag time.
I'm trying to figure out the way to phrase this. Probably you're still going to see them on there, and I'll tell you why. Many of the warnings that all your required things will disappear once you're done with those. And if there are no warnings, you're never going to see that on your error report again. But not all repositories use all of the preferred elements that might create a warning. For example, here at the Southwest Collection, Texas Tech University, we don't use use restrict as a tag. Use restrict is a preferred element that is going to always give you a warning. Because we don't use it, we're ignoring it and not adding it to this. We may in the future, but so as a result, our error reports always have use restrict on all 600 of my finding aids. So that shouldn't hopefully alarm anyone. It's just that there will always be an error report if you choose to ignore those warnings because of internal policy or because of you only have time to fix the real critical things on your finding aids.
Are there any other questions out there? You can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and
Sure. Stephanie, I won't try your last name, I apologize. But Stephanie has asked a question, the difference between soft launch and hard launch. The one thing I'll say, the critical thing to know about that is that those portions of what's going on are handled by Carla Alvarez, who's the product owner for this project that's going on, as well as UT Libraries, of course, who are doing the work. So to not speak out of turn to that, soft launch will occur on May 18th. It is them releasing a site in its imperfect form that will be available at the very least, as explained to me now, to all the repositories that are going to have finding aids on it. This will be a chance to for us to provide feedback to them about things that don't work or things that work well. I mean, I'm sure they want to hear what's working more than more errors, and a chance to play with this site. For example, what I'm going to do is give it to my reference archivists, my colleagues here, for them to use as they would normally use current TARO for patrons, right? And then I'm sure they will bombard me with all of the things that they wish it could do or things that I promised them that it doesn't do yet. And that soft launch period will last right up until, I don't want to quote the date. I know that data remediation ends September 1st. So that soft launch site will become the hard launch site, the finalized TARO site there at launch. So to sum up, it's a chance for us all to play with the site and perhaps give it to patrons if you want to. We'll clarify that with Carla as the time draws closer, but definitely a chance for us all to use it and make sure it's the best thing for our patrons and to make sure the finding aids we remediated actually show up on the dang thing. And I should tell you, here's a good perk that we're all going to love. Part of the design, not only of TARO 2.0, but this qual site, is to make sure your finding aids show up almost in real time. And I know a lot of you guys have folks go back and double check the finding aid once it's on TARO, see if you messed something up, if you missed something or whatever. And that'll be an opportunity to make sure that that's happening in real time, which I, for one, am thrilled about.
Robert, Emily had a question about, a timeline for when the expectation to have errors fixed. Is it by the soft launch date or the hard launch date?
It's
what's your goal?
Well, by the hard launch date for sure. UT Libraries is going to lock down the legacy site on maybe it was September 1st. I apologize. Oh, there's good. The schedule's back up on the screen. Thanks, James. So that is the drop dead date, for lack of a better term, for having all of the required errors resolved. Again, warnings are strongly encouraged because it's going to help your finding aid be more discoverable on the site, but that's the drop dead date. The May 18th date is when they will migrate all of the finding aids that comply with the new TARO to the soft launch site. But you will not lose all of your finding aids on the legacy side. Everything that's on legacy is going to stay there, which might be your immediate follow-up question, right? So legacy site will keep everything on it. This soft launch site will display all of the things that comply with what it needs. And that'll start on May 18th, and it will continue as we go along. They'll continue to migrate things over so that we can test those. Public URLs from Amanda. So Amanda's asked, when public URLs will change and if we will know the pattern on the URLs ahead of time. Since it currently, y'all may be familiar, the URLs say legacy in them, right? The new site, as you may remember from emails long ago, is txarchives.org. And if it's not for some reason, if Samantha or someone needs to correct me, but it should be txarchives.org. Thank you, Amanda, or Samantha put that in the chat. So I don't know exactly when those will change over. Certainly, when the hard launch happens at September 28th, those URLs will change, and the only way for folks to access them will be with that new URL. We're discussing with UT to confirm, so I wouldn't want to say now how long the legacy site can redirect people over, but there will be a date when the legacy site and its URL cease to exist, and we'll no longer direct people over to that. As soon as we know, we're going to make sure everybody else knows. So Amanda mentioned Mark records, and you know what? That's my cataloger wasn't happy to hear it, but those will have to be updated with that new URL in order for people to access it from those OCLC or wherever they're touching a Mark record. Juliana had asked, and I think I just addressed it, how long will the legacy site stay up? And we don't know yet. Well, I'll say the legacy site won't be visible after hard launch. Will it redirect people if they use that URL? Hopefully for a while, but we don't know yet. And I recognize I feel your pain, all of you that have to, I have a couple different websites that have to have all of these URLs updated, and we're preparing for it. We're going to do what we can, but the URLs will disappear. How long will they redirect? We don't know. When we know, you're going to know. Wow, that Sorry, James, I'll just jump in and I'll just do what I do.
I don't know if I can answer that one.
Will Google searches, Jesse Fishman has asked, will Google searches still lead people to outdated links? I can say this much, that part of the way the site was designed, or is being designed, is being program developed, whatever the terminology is to ensure that Google crawls, certainly Google Analytics, which is what they were thinking, hopefully they still are, about using for us to determine the usage of these things. And Archive, Grid, and other places will have these updated quickly. They've already messed with Archive Grid a little, and a lot of my finding aids that didn't used to show up on there show up now. So while I can't give you a firm answer, I can say that everything I've seen has been encouraging about them trying to code the site, or however it works, I just don't know, and structure it in such a way that it will show up. I mean, Google is Google. If there's dead links out there for a while, it takes time for it to crawl and update however its magic works, but they have a part of their design dedicated to facilitate SEO, right? Search engine optimization. So, honestly, when you asked that question, I didn't know how much of that I knew. And then I realized I had a lot of information inside me. So I appreciate it. Olivia Solis has asked, are there any major style decisions that might affect how we implement during remediation? If so, where should we look for them? For example, it looks like Olivia's folks currently put commas between consecutive unit dates, but if TARO 2.0 puts unit date tags on separate lines, that would not be necessary. Okay, good, really good question. The idea that we're operating under, and that we've seen no indication will change, is that the way you encode your free text now and all that good stuff is going to stay the same. So the only changes we know for sure will need to occur are the ones that we're doing right now with this website, with the one that James showed you. So let me think. For example, if you don't have one I can think of that you might have to change is that in the FizzDesk, well, I'm going out into the weeds of metadata now, but in FizzDesk, where you put your box count, your linear feet and everything, currently in EAD 2002, it's recommended that you put within FizzDesk the extent tags, and it's also in our best practice guide. That is now a required element or sub element, whatever it would be within FizzDesk. So in that case, you don't have to change the data you enter, but you are going to have to close it in 2 more tags. So that's an example of sort of a minor thing that's occurring. But the idea is, especially in your DSC or container or inventory, however you refer to it in-house, we're not really supposed to be changing how any of that works. If that does occur, we'll let you know. But the idea was to touch as little as possible, even though obviously we're having to touch some stuff or we wouldn't be having this training. So I hope that answers your question. We're trying to maintain it the way it is, except for the stuff we're fixing in remediation. But I'm going to be honest with you, Olivia, I'm writing that down because we haven't talked a lot about if the inventory is affected. And it's always good to double check with UT libraries, and I'm going to make sure that we do that.
Well, we have about 10 more minutes. Are there any more questions? You can put them in the chat or unmute yourself.
Thank you, Becky. For those who didn't see the chat, she did. I can't believe I forgot it. So Becky's great, y'all. She encourages us all to look at soft launch when our finding aids are showing up on this new site. See if it's showing up the way you wanted it to show up. See if it's showing up the way you used to do it, and then provide that feedback so that those things get caught and get addressed. It is a real chance for, as James said, 2.5 months of hardcore feedback to make sure that it's doing what everybody asked for when we started this project.
Yes, lots of great questions. I think I think it's probably great to take some of these questions and and put them on TARO today. So at least people who are not able to attend this meeting will be able to find some answers in some way. So
and so you have this recording. So but if you need me to tighten up any of the extensive explanations, I'll do it for you.
yeah.
Amanda says in chat, and as Amy mentioned, there'll be some potential for on-site trainings now that the world is just slowly, loosening up. People can see one another. If locations would like to request an on-site training, make sure to get that information to Amy and Amanda, so that can be done. We had several scheduled, for one for SSA that was going to be in Denton and canceled it. So we want to do these things in person if we can.
Yes, absolutely. And if you have any other questions that you think about afterwards, whether it's regarding training material or requesting on-site training, or maybe some questions you have about the buddy system and remediation, our contact information is up on the screen. Please feel free to contact us and email us. This is an ongoing process, and we're trying to refine things as we go, and opportunities to address different issues can always pop up, and if you relay those to us, then we can actually provide the resources to help things, because we certainly have from the outreach and education committee, kind of the things that we think people need, but that's based off our assumptions, and the more information that you can provide to us, the more we can tailor things as far as training into the summer and the fall. So, well, if there are not any other questions, I think we could go ahead and end this kickoff meeting. Thanks so much to Robert and Amy and Amanda, and then Samantha for managing our chat. If you should have any questions, please feel free to email us. This is just the beginning for working with TARO 2.0, and it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you all are too. So